Hello and welcome back to Cask Theology, a channel about theology and beer. Now in today's episode we're heading back into the cellar to answer the question, what is cask ale? So go grab yourself a drink, put a coat on because it's still cold in there, and let's answer the question, what is cask ale? So first off, it has to be noted that like with keg beer, cask ale refers to a method of storage and dispense. In fact, cask ale is the way most beers were stored and transported until the keg came along. It's the grandfather of beer delivery. Delivering drinks in casks is not a new thing. Records from ancient times record ales and wines being transported in wooden casks. Now, although the materials and transport methods have changed over time, it's essentially the same method that's been used for centuries. Let's quickly talk about the phrase real ale, which is often used interchangeably with the phrase cask ale. And it was coined by the aptly named group, the Campaign for Real Ale, or CAMRA, who I'm going to talk about in my next beer video. The term was created in the 1970s to create a distinction between the sort of beer that comes in a keg and the sort of beer that comes in a cask. Beers like mild, porter and pale ale usually came in casks, but beers like lager and cider usually came in kegs, and while there are fundamental differences in the styles and the way they're brewed, the average guy just saw them all as, well, beer. So the term real ale became a kind of catch-all term for the more traditional beers that came in a cask. Let's get on to how casks work and how they differ from kegs. The difference, to use an old English phrase, is chalk and cheese. Now, I've already done a video on how kegs work, so I'm not going to dwell on that too much. So I shall tell you the biggest difference between the two. A cask is what is known as a live product, as in it contains active yeast. So in short, to quote all those Frankenstein movies, it's alive. Cask ale does not come ready to serve straight away, like with a keg. It actually requires a bit of work on the part of the pub staff. Casks arrive in a pub in a state of almost done, and it's the staff looking after the cellar who actually finish off the brewing process that was started in the brewery. Cask ale therefore requires much more care than a keg that you can just hook up and pour and forget about, but the result is a great tasting beer. However, if you don't give it the care it deserves, it can go horribly wrong very easily. Now, cask beer enthusiasts are often aware of the care and time needed to ensure a good product, and there's many groups, like CAMRA, who I've mentioned before, and Caskmark, again, another video, who will recognise pubs who are known for keeping their beer in tip-top condition. Many pubs will wear this as a badge of honour, because who wouldn't want to be known as a place that looks after their beer well and produces good beer? Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of what to do when a cask ale shows up, because it's very different from that of a keg, which you just roll into place and connect. When you get a cask into your business, you do three things. You rack it, you tap it, and then you vent it. And I'm going to go through what each of those stages mean right now. First off, let's talk about racking. Now, racking is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to put the cask into a rack, or we're going to put it into a place where it's going to sit for the rest of its time in our business. Casks differ from kegs in that they've got sediment in them, so you need to put them in a secure place where all this sediment is allowed to settle to the bottom and in a place where they're not going to be knocked or moved. If you disturb a cask once you put it on sale, you are going to ruin the entire cask, and nobody wants that. Over my many years of looking after cask, I have seen two methods that I've seen used, which I'll go through now. The first was to place the cask into a spring-loaded rack. Now, these were specially designed so that the cask would slowly rise as it emptied. So when the cask was at a 45-degree angle, you could tell, yep, that's empty. The second method I've seen used, which is the method that I use nowadays, is to store the cask vertically, which allows you to store more of them if you don't have much space, and it can actually help you to get more out of the cask itself. Once our cask is nice and secure and it isn't going to move anywhere, we're going to do what's called tapping it. So we basically get a tap, we get a mallet, and we wallop it straight into the barrel, and we're going to make sure that the tap is shut. This is for a reason I'm going to go through in a moment. Now, the tap is slightly different depending on which storage method you're going to use, but they both do exactly the same thing. They attach the barrel to the beer line. Finally, we are going to vent our cask. When the cask arrives, it is still brewing. the yeast inside it is still doing its thing, and that creates gas. Gas that is going to need to escape. So for this last bit, we're going to use a little porous cork thing called a spile, which allows gas to escape but keeps the beer in. Well, mostly, depending on the pressure inside the cask. Now, on the spring-loaded casks, we again use a mallet to pierce the vent in the top and place a soft peg in the hole to let the gas escape slowly. On the vertical racked ones, the tap itself comes with a vent, so all it is a case of popping a little spile into it and then opening the valve. And then, whether it's vertically racked or horizontally racked, we're going to let it do its thing for about 48 hours. In this crucial 48 hours, all of the sediment that's in the cask is going to be drawn to the bottom of it with what's known as finings. Finings are bits that will trap all of the yeast and finish off the brewing process by removing anything that's going to affect the taste or the aroma of the beer. Now, it's worth a note that a lot of these finings are derived from animal products, essentially meaning that cask ale isn't really suitable for vegans or some vegetarians. The most famous of these finings are gelatin and isinglass, which is made from the swim bladder of fish, most notably sturgeon. Now, that being said, a lot of brewers nowadays are using new ways of filtering their beers that don't use animal products, so essentially making them vegan. It's best to check the label though, but on screen now are a few brewers that make vegan beers. Once 48 hours have passed, you need to check up on your beer to make sure that it can be served. Now, the best way to do this is to very carefully take a sample from your cask and hold it to the light, or any light source, to see if it's dropped bright. Or, if you want to use non-beery terms, you need to ask 3 questions. Is it clear? Does it smell alright? Does it taste alright? If the answer is yes to all 3 of those questions, then it is ready to go and it's time to hook up the beer line. Now, with your spring-loaded ones, that's usually a watertight screw-on connected to the tap. But in the vertical ones, you have to lower in a clever tube into the cask, which will float at the top of the beer and suck it all out. Timing is crucial in this regard once you've hooked up the beer and you've started to sell it. Oxygen will start getting into your cask, and after about 3 days, it will start to affect the quality and degrade the beer. So, cask ale certainly requires a quicker turnover than keg beer, which you can just sit and leave there. So, once you've got it open, you need to get it out within 3 days. Another area that cask ale differs from keg ale is in the method of dispense. Now, cask ale doesn't go through a chilling unit, and it is instead best served at cellar temperature, or, more commonly, between 9 degrees centigrade and 12 degrees centigrade, which is probably where all those British warm beer jokes come from. But there is a bit of method in this madness. If the temperature is too high, any residual yeast that's in the pipe, or any that's still floating around, will carry on doing its thing and it will spoil the beer. Too low of a temperature will cause the beer to spoil and go cloudy in what's called a chill haze, and both will affect the taste and quality of the beer. Another way that cask differs from keg quite considerably is that it has a couple of methods of being dispensed. Now, the first method is called gravity dispense. Now, this is the old, incredibly old school method, which you'll see in things like Lord of the Rings and any medieval fantasy. And all that is that the beer is taken out of the tap straight from the barrel. The second method, which is the method that's used today most often, is the gas-assisted hand pull. Now, the gas-assisted hand pull has got a much cooler sounding name, and that is the beer engine. Now, this is a manual hand pump that will move the beer through the pipes with the assistance of a gas motor. Now, much like with keg beer, there's a little bit of technique to get it right once it's coming out, but once you've cracked it, you will get a fantastic pint of cask ale to enjoy. And so there you have it. That is a brief introduction into the world of cask ale. Now, in my next beery video, I'll be looking at CAMRA, who they are, what they do, and their connection to cask ale. So if you want to check that out, best way of course to do that is to hit the little subscribe thing in the corner there. Now, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll answer them all as best as I can. But until next time, go grab yourself a drink and keep asking questions, hopefully with a nice cask ale.